Beginning. Our final speaker, Aravindan Neelakandan, is a contributing editor of Swarajya. He has earlier worked in the Natural Resources Development Project of Vivekananda Kendra. He has written books in Tamil and has co-authored Breaking India. Aravindan Neelakandan will now speak on harmony of science and art in Maharshi, Sri Aurobindo and Mahakavi Bharathi in the context of Tamil literature.
And I will be as fast as possible. So, take my own time. Okay. And so, this is about the harmony of science and art in Maharishi Sri Aurobindo and Mahakavi Bharathi. Both, they have some very interesting similarities. For example, Maharishi Sri Aurobindo's father wanted no trace of Indian culture should be falling on Sri Aurobindo. And Mahakavi Bharathi's father wanted him to take a strictly engineering mathematics education and no literature or anything. He was not very much fond of his son getting interested in literature. So that is the first connection they have. Now, how do we do it? Yeah. So in 1959, 9 years after Mahasamadhi of Sri Aurobindo, there was a book published in the West. It was called The Two Cultures and Scientific Revolution. It was written by C.P. Snow, and Charles Percy Snow was actually a scientist as well as a novelist. So what he said in his book was that there is this literary tradition and there is this scientific tradition, and there is a kind of no interaction, or there is no proper harmony between these two traditions, and because of that, the society is suffering. And then in his second edition, he talked about a third culture emerging in the West. That the second edition came in around 1960s, early 1960s, and he talked about a third culture emerging, which actually was trying to harmonize science and the scientific tradition and the literary tradition. And the entire talk is about how this third culture was there in Sri Aurobindo and Mahakavi Bharathi decades before. He was talking about third culture and how the Indian philosophical tradition formed a fertile basis for this third culture. And to understand that, we will contextualize the whole situation. So, So the most important scientific revolution that happened at that time, that the Newtonian science was at its peak during the 19th century, and the most important scientific revolution that happened was the discovery of natural selection by Charles Darwin. And the book came out in 1859. The Origin of Species. It came out in 1859. Now, Charles Darwin, what actually he discovered was not that from the apes the humans came. He never said that. The usual picture that we get in the, usually if you do a Google search, image search for evolution, this is the picture that you will be getting. But that is absolutely wrong. Darwin never said that the humans evolved from apes. Darwin said humans are part and parcel of the ape family. We are just another branch of the ape family. So this is what he wrote. This is the most beautiful picture that has ever been made in the history of biological sciences, I would say. And he says that I think, that is the humility of the person, I think, and then he points out that actually it is the tree branching out. It is not a ladder. It is not a chain with white caucasoid male at the top, at the end of the evolution, the height of evolution. No, we are just another one branch in the grand phylogenetic tree. That is the major discovery of Charles Darwin. And in his notes, and these notes he wrote in 1938. It was in, 1838. In 1859, he published the book. And in 1838, he had started taking notes. For 20 years, he was working on the data. For 20 years, he was working on the data that he has collected from his HMS Beagle journey. And he points out two important things in these notes. One is that there is one living spirit prevalent over the world, and another one is that there is one thinking, sensible principle which is modified into endless forms bearing a close relation in degree and kind to the endless forms of the living beings. Now, in this particular notes, you can find actually the principle of evolution that was problematic to certain worldviews. And that is why another one great biologist who also happened to be an ex-Marxist, J.B.S. Haldane, he said that Charles Darwin, without Europeans realizing, Charles Darwin has actually converted entire Europe to Hinduism with his concept of evolution. So that remark J.B.S. Haldane made, and he said it may look like a joke, but there is a deeper truth in it. The deeper truth is this, that in this manifold different manifestations, infinite manifestations, there are basic one principle underlying it, and understanding that principle is the basis of biological evolution. Now, the West, whether it understood really, even the biologists of the West, whether they understood the philosophical worldview implications of evolution is questionable, because they created something called social Darwinism. Darwin never proposed social Darwinism. It was a pseudoscience. It was made to keep status quo and justify colonialism and imperialism and all that kind of things. Now, one person who understood Charles Darwin very clearly and very correctly was Acharya J.C. Bose. Okay. So, what J.C. Bose did was that if one of the important things that Charles Darwin told was that if you are having evolution, then anything could not just appear out of the blues. So if you are having mind in human beings, then there should be mind in non-human animals, there should be forms of cognition in plants as well. So he always said that these are all continuum. We will come to that later. These are all continuum. And most of the Western scientists of that period could not understand that aspect of Darwin. Darwin himself did some work on the plant cognition, and he proposed something called the root brain hypothesis, that the root actually behaves like brain, that the root system of the plants, they behave like kind of neural networks. If you have seen the Avatar movie, you can very easily visualize that particular aspect. So Jagadish Chandra Bose was one person who understood this very clearly, and he created instruments that could actually measure the sensitivity of the plants. So you can see some of his books here. This was the instrument he developed. Yeah. These are the books. You can see one important book is this, The Nervous Mechanism of Plants. Now we all know that plants don't have nerves. Plants don't have nerves. But he was talking about nervous mechanism of plants. Please go to Google, and now you search neurobiology of plants. You will have a lot of papers, peer-reviewed papers. Because when he said this, everybody was kind of laughing at him, or everybody was thinking that this guy is telling some kind of mystical nonsense at that time. But he was able to show the graphs, how the plants were responding, not only the plants, how the inanimate matter was responding. What we are calling as inanimate matter, how it was responding. And he was telling all these categories, these boundaries that we are making, animate, inanimate, plants without sense, all those kind of boundaries are not very correct. These boundaries are a lot artificial. So he again makes this wonderful statement. See, that the last words are enough for you to read, that they who see but one in all the changing manifoldness of this universe, unto them belong the eternal truth, unto none else. This, he made this statement in 1902. Now you just compare this with the notes that Charles Darwin had taken. Those notes were prepared long after the time of Jagadish Chandra Bose. They were published long after the time of Jagadish Chandra Bose. In 1838, what Charles Darwin felt and what 1902 Jagadish Chandra Bose said, you can see the connectivity. So now, why I am presenting this particular aspect is because there is, for science, to understand science and do good science, you need a very good philosophical grounding. And that philosophical grounding with a kind of epistemological pluralism is present in India. And how much we have been using it or we are not using it, we are squandering it, we don't know. But those who used it, they were able to create wonderful things. So that is the first aspect. Now, when Jagadish Chandra Bose wanted to create an institution for science, there were a lot of obstructions created by the colonial government, and one person who helped him a lot was Bhagini Nivedita, as we all know, and that is why he created a relief of Bhagini Nivedita. It was based on the painting by Nandlal Bose there, and he added, she is the woman of Vedanta, not a plaything for any man, and she was holding a lamp, the lamp of light of knowledge that she was holding. So here you see the involvement of Sister Nivedita here, and this is where the things get interesting, because in the case of both Mahakavi Bharathi and Maharishi Sri Aurobindo, you have the Nivedita connection. Nivedita was the one who was accepted by Bharathi as his guru. And in the case of Sri Aurobindo, when he was in Baroda, it was Sister Nivedita who told him to come to Bengal and take over the freedom fight in a more fierce manner. And later, when he wanted to go to Pondicherry, it was Sister Nivedita who facilitated it. So, Sister Nivedita played a very important role in both the lives of Sri Aurobindo and Mahakavi Bharathi. She also played an important role in the institution building of science in the case of India. So, all these things are somehow related. How they are related, we will see. Now, Sri Aurobindo came to Tamil Nadu. And in Tamil Nadu, he was studying the different philosophical traditions of Tamil Nadu. He made an in-depth study of the different philosophical traditions of Tamil Nadu. One of them was that of Nammalvar. He had actually translated some of the poems of Nammalvar. Nammalvar was the saint who is the base of Sri Vaishnavism. And Nammalvar was born in a small town in the district of Tirunelveli, from where Subramania Bharathi comes. And in the case of Nammalvar, one of the basic philosophy of Nammalvar, the very beautiful vision of Nammalvar is that the entire physical universe is the body of Vishnu. Vishnu forms the antaryami of not only the living organisms, what we perceive as living organisms, but he also forms the antaryami. He forms the soul of, the life of everything, including the 5 Panchabhutas. So, Panchabhutas is the concept then. Now we can tell that from quarks to galaxy, all the physical universe that you are seeing, this Vishnu permeates the entire universe. That is the basis of Nammalvar's philosophy, and that forms the basis of Sri Aurobindo's philosophy, as we will be seeing. So, here is, I have taken one poem from Sri Aurobindo and 2 poems from Subramania Bharathi. The poem that I have taken here is Electron by Sri Aurobindo. It was written in 15 July 1938. And here you can see, we will just see the important parts. Let us look at all those things that he talks about, how it is the spark from the eternal energy spilt. And also he says about it being the flaming chariot of Shiva. And he also talks about how Shiva is the one devised innumerably to be, and his oneness invisible forms he hides, and then times tiny temples of eternity. That is a very interesting statement that Sri Aurobindo makes. What electron, a small particle, has to do with time. Now, we all know about the dual nature of electron and the kind of problems, the philosophical problems that the physics were fighting over about quantum mechanics. That is the 1927 Slovak conference, the 5th Slovak conference, 1927, where all important scientists were there, and that is where Niels Bohr and Albert Einstein entered into a great fight, and Einstein said, criticizing quantum mechanics, Einstein said that God does not play dice with the universe, and Niels Bohr was irritated and he answered, Albert, please stop telling God what to do and what not to do. And the point is, this double slit experiment was kind of showing that the prapancha, the universe that we are seeing is actually Mishra Prapancha. It is a mixture of consciousness and what we call matter, and it is not just matter. Consciousness plays an important role, or at least the observer plays an important role. But what does it have to do with time? That I am coming to. That is Archibald Wheeler. The person who is there is Archibald Wheeler. He was a person who was also interested in Indian Vedanta, but this doesn't have to do with Indian Vedanta. He created a kind of a mind experiment in which he said that there is a possibility of the future affecting the past in terms of billions of years. So he thought of light source coming from a quasar, and in between there is a dense galaxy, and the light is coming because of the gravitational lens, light is coming like this. And if you are going to know the path of the light, then the light would behave like a particle. But if you don't know the path of the light, how it is coming, then it would behave like a wave. And how you are going to take the measurement billions of years after the light has left, that would determine how the light would be coming to you. So in a way, the future is affecting the past. So this was just in 1970s when Archibald Wheeler proposed it. It was a thought experiment. But in 1999, this experiment was actually done in a small setup, and that is the thing here. And here, this is called delayed choice quantum eraser experiment. You can just go and Google it. So it is there is a beautiful video also by Smithsonian Institute that explains it in very simple terms. It's very wonderful, actually. So what it shows is that these tiny particles, whether they are electrons or whether they are photons, these tiny particles of the quantum realm, they somehow contain the eternity in them. So here is Sri Aurobindo making a statement. Sri Aurobindo doesn't know anything about quantum mechanics. Let us be very clear about certain things. He doesn't know anything about this quantum eraser experiment that was coming in 1999. We are not telling that somehow Sri Aurobindo knew all these things. But what I am saying is that he creates an imagery with his poetic capabilities. You can call it because of the supramental capability. Whatever it is, he is creating an imagery. That imagery has the capacity to expand itself to whatever scientific inquiries that are happening. This is a very important thing in teaching science to children. You have to have beautiful imageries rooted in their culture. And our culture has this capacity. A person like Sri Aurobindo sitting in a place like Pondicherry, and he is writing something about electron in 1938 that resonates with the latest experiments that are happening and the profound questions that are happening. Now, if you are able to explain how this particular paradox happens, then you can win a Nobel Prize for India, actually. Okay. So, come to the next. In the same poem, there are some 4 lines. Atom and molecule in their unseen plan, buttress and edifice of strange oneness, crystal and plant, insect and beast and man, man on whom the world unity shall cease. Now, what does electron have to do with atom and molecule? And okay, atom and molecule, we can understand what electron has to do with, but what does it have to do with crystal and plant and insect and beast and man? What does it have to do with evolution and life processes? So, now there is a very interesting field that has been developing, the foundation for which was laid by Stuart Hoffman and Roger Penrose. They are telling that consciousness itself may be a quantum phenomenon. Now, just be very clear with this. This particular thing doesn't have anything to do with your corporate gurus or Deepak Chopra using quantum quackery. This is something very serious. These people are telling that there is a possibility of quantum phenomena being the basis of consciousness. That is a speculation they have put forth. And later, Jim Al-Khalili, who is a very wonderful scientist, he had written a book completely on life on the edge in which he explores quantum effects that play a very important role in fundamental life processes, like, for example, in photosynthesis. It's very easy for us to understand in how birds do migration, how they are able to find the directions, how they do the magnetoreception. In that, quantum mechanics plays an important role. For example, here you have George Sudarshan, a very great Indian scientist, he proposed something called quantum Zeno effect. That quantum Zeno effect essentially means something like if you are observing a quantum system, then it would kind of slow itself, and if you are not observing, it would be quicker. Actually, this is something that we ourselves would have felt. When you are filling a water bottle, then if you are looking at it, it will look like as if it is very time consuming. If you are not looking at it, it will suddenly overflow. So that is a psychological effect actually, but this is something really serious, something that actually happens, and that now they have discovered that was in 2013, there is a Nature paper, they discovered that this quantum Zeno effect plays an important role in birds identifying how things are. So here you see, there is a poem by Sri Aurobindo in 1938, and within it, it contains or it encodes all these aspects. It can grow with science. That is the beauty of a very good poetry. It can actually grow with science, and it can induce you to understand and appreciate science, the beauty of science, through a wonderful window that it creates. Right? Now we come to the great Subramanya Bharathi. So Subramanya Bharathi's this particular poem is a very wonderful poem. Okay, he says that in the forest of time, pattern, that is, this universe is a tree. In that tree roams Kali Sakti the bee, buzzing the sound hymn with Atava's primordial as its 6 legs. So sing the seers ancient who witnessed this bee fairy, spatial dimensions and direction, worlds terrestrial and celestial, they are all Shakti floating. And all these are wonders of her crafty concealment, and so on the poetry goes. It's a beautiful poetry, very lyrical. So even a 8-year-old child can memorize it and sing it beautifully for music competition. But imagine what it encodes. Now, here is this famous painting by Salvador Dali, Persistence of Memory. That is the title of this painting. In this painting, what you see is that time is presented as a fluid thing. It is very easy for us to visualize time as fluid. Very easy. Okay, yeah, Newtonian time itself is fluid time. It can just flow like that with the uniform speed. Or, if you are a bit more advanced in your thinking, you will visualize time as flowing at different speeds. And also eddy currents in all that you can visualize. But what you cannot visualize is time as a landscape. So here what Bharathi does is, he visualizes time as a landscape, a forest. And then, this is a very great time. This is a time that encompasses all the universes. So the universe becomes, which is a pattern. That is, the way he puts these words are fantastic. The universe is nothing but a pattern, and this pattern of this universe is a single tree in this. And what is buzzing around in this? It is the consciousness that is Kali. Kali Shakti is. And what are the legs of this insect? You know, insects have 6 legs. That is why spiders are not insects. Spiders have 8 legs. So insects have 6 legs. In zoological classification, it is hexapoda. So 6 legs creatures. What are these 6 legs? They are the Atavas. What are Atavas? Atavas is a technical term. Essentially, it is divided into 2 groups. 3 represent material universe, 3 represent vibrational universe. Mantram, Padam, Vannam. So these 3 are immaterial, sound-based, vibration-based aspects of the universe. And then you have Bhuvanam, Tattvam, Kala, which are the material aspects of the universe, the categories and the different aspects of the material universe. So they form the legs of this insect. Think about the kind of imagination that he puts into this particular poem, and the kind of imagery that he gives. Fine, exotic imagination. Beyond that, we don't have to think much about this. Is it so? No. Because here, this is actually an article that came in 2018 in Scientific American. This particular author, Bernardo Castro, is a wonderful author, very young, so very young that I don't want to put his picture here because I was a bit jealous of him. Okay, he is young and he is a wonderful writer. He can actually perceive into the heart of things, and this is the book that he has written. But in the Scientific American article, this particular word, you just look at it, when he talks about time, he actually takes the same stand as, so another 5 minutes, right? He actually takes the same stand as Henry Bergson, but it is even more profound. And he tells this particular thing. You have started to visualize time as the landscape of valley and mountains. Bharathi went even further. He visualized it as forest. In 2018 Scientific American, this person who lived long before, in as our Jadayuji said, chronic poverty. Chronic poverty he was living, and he was sitting in a small place under colonial tyranny, and he was able to imagine such a profound thing. Just think about it. What kind of a poet we had in Bharathi. And I will come to the last one. This is about life. This is the poem he wrote about life. Okay. So he talks about life. This is a prose poem, kind of. And he talks about this. Look at this particular thing. We meditate upon all those forms of life that permeate land, water, and air. Unseen by our naked eyes, there exist in a square feet of atmosphere millions of microorganisms. Macroorganism, and in its body are smaller organisms, and in each of them still smaller organisms, and in them each still smaller organisms. And in this way, the whole planet thrives with life. When I read these lines, you should right now be remembering one great man who passed away in 16 July. Who was that? James Lovelock, that great biologist who propounded Gaia Hypothesis. And when did he propound Gaia Hypothesis? 1971, and later he got the idea in 1971, later he put it in a peer-reviewed paper around 1976-77 along with Lynn Margulis. And just look at this, we meditate upon this, and a macroorganism, and in its body are smaller organisms, and in each of them still smaller organisms, and macroorganisms containing a bigger form and containing still bigger organisms, and so on, and infinity in both directions he talks about. He talks about a biocosm that exists in the planet itself. And just see the wordings of, I'm sorry, it is not very clear wordings of what James Lovelock says. He says that physics agree that life is an open system, but like one those of Russian dolls which enclose a series of smaller and smaller and smaller dolls. Now, these are the words of James Lovelock. Decades after Subramania Bharathi, and James Lovelock too was a fiercely independent soul. But just think about this. A Bharathi living in chronic poverty who was able to sing you science in Tamil. And we just reduced him to some kind of just a social reformer, or a person whose 2 or 3 lines we will quote during our speeches, and our children will just sing 1 or 2 lines. Point is, we have to use him in science education. We have to use Sri Aurobindo in science education. Visualization is an important aspect of doing science. James Lovelock himself talks about it. When you are talking about quark, you tell there is charm, you tell there is up, down. When you are talking about electrons, you talk about the spin quantum numbers. There is no spin actually in the electron. This is helping you to visualize things. So, if you can create metaphors and images from your own culture for the children to understand, then they will be able to do better science. They will be able to do better art. For that, we can use Sri Aurobindo and Mahakavi Bharathi. Thank you for this opportunity. We have any questions or anything? Or we can...
You spoke about imagery, and I'm thinking of the example, if we see science and the Sanskrit terms for it, like Shulvari, in it itself there is imagery. Science, in fact, is already full of imagery. So can we draw upon that?
We can. In fact, not only from Sanskrit, from each and every regional language in India. Because I would say, today we are talking about philology and all that, but in my opinion, all the languages in India, whether you classify them as Indo-European or you classify them as Dravidian, it doesn't matter. All the languages in India are Hindu languages of India. They form a Hindu family of languages. We have to work on that actually. And hence, they all have the capacity for this particular deep imagery. Okay. So, but when an Indian seer touches English, that also gets that capacity to form deep imagery, that as Sri Aurobindo has demonstrated. So, yes, we can do that. That is why we are insisting that science education, the primary level at least, should be given in mother tongue. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Any other question?
Thank you for the really enlightening, talk. So I had the good fortune of actually visiting the Bose Institute in Calcutta, which was, the home and now I think a museum of Sri Jagdish Chandra Bose. And one of the things which really fascinated me was his lesser known work with metals. Like we know that, he's the one who first discovered that. Yeah, sure. So, okay, to just kind of crystallize the question. So like you correctly mentioned that he's the one who unified the organic and the inorganic world of matter. And when you compare that with Sri Aurobindo's work on the supermind, where he kind of synthesizes the inorganic and organic intelligence. Can you just talk a little bit about this part?
Okay, with respect to this, see, even in India, in many of the Indian traditions, we talk about the Chit and Achit as some two separate things. And as if there are things that have consciousness, there are things that don't have consciousness. But J.C. Bose clearly showed that even in those things that we consider as not having consciousness, inanimate matter, their response, particularly to strain, that is the thing, that graph which shows that the tin foils, they respond in the same way a living tissue responds to stress and strain. So this is something that in a way, as I told in the case of Nammalvar, he says that essentially the word is Udal misai uyirana karandengum parantulan. That means Vishnu exists in our body like life, and it is not a ghost in a machine, that he exists permeating the entire body, each and every cell, each and every mitochondria, every DNA fiber. He is there in our body completely. So what J.C. Bose said was he brought back the deeper wisdom of India. He reinforced with concrete science. Okay, and then when Sri Aurobindo was talking about the evolution from inanimate matter itself, he was again reinforcing it in more beautiful terms, particularly in Savitri. If I remember it correctly, it is something about the unnamed folds coming out and creating the matter, and from matter the consciousness steeps into the plants, and then it flowers into the green delight and the flowers and all that. There is a beautiful passage in Savitri there he talks about exactly what you say. Again, all these things, I will tell you this, it helps the children to understand evolution in a more poetic manner. Because, can I take 2 minutes? Okay. See, have you noticed when a teenager becomes an atheist? Have you noticed when a teenager becomes an atheist, particularly in modern generations? For me, I can tell from my personal experience, when I studied Darwin, I became an atheist. I understood that there is no creator God, and talking about creator God is nonsense. Okay. So, this Darwinian theory has the capacity to shake your foundations, particularly if you haven't fed our children with proper Indian knowledge, and we ape the Abrahamic concept of creator God and teach them that. Actually, we are teaching, most of our people are teaching that Abrahamic creator concept God to our children. So naturally, that God gets destroyed when a child learns evolution. But if we are having these aspects into our religion as well as our education and teach them this, then they will be able to understand and imbibe evolution without cultural shock. They will be able to do better science. They will be able to do better art. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Thank you.